welcome back to the Shut In Things podcast. I'm your host, Glenn, and with me again as a guest is Peter. We are discussing the enterprising individual known as David Hahn, and just like last time, there is a content warning up top about bodily harm, natural disasters, and potential unaliving. We left off with David moving everything back into the potting shed and taking off from there. From this point, David realized he needed to shift from his very dangerous experiments of rockets, fireworks, and his random mixtures.
Yeah, some folks might hear this and laugh or think, why would you, encourage this kind of behavior in someone who's basically a troublemaker? But there's this assumption that Boy Scouts are, to this day, that Boy Scouts are a cut above. You're a generally responsible kid. You can trust this kid with a pocket knife, with matches, help old ladies cross the street. And so much so that when if you make Eagle Scout and you join the military, they credit you for that. You get a little extra hash mark on your sleeve for being an Eagle Scout. So this might have actually been the perfect cover for this. You know what I mean? It adds this sort of air of legitimacy to his acting out. He's playing with fire, yeah, but he's a scout.
He changed his energy from that, and instead, his energy and time was spent with the scouts.
Yeah, like harnessing the energy as opposed to like trying to stifle it.
He underwent the survival training required of scouts. He seemed to enjoy it. They learned how to start fires without matches,
There's there's no putting lightning in a bottle. This is
and they would stage rescue scenarios of different scouts. They would, pretend there was some kind of danger, and then the scouts would train to resolve the situation.
mhm. Oh yeah, no, Scouts is serious about this stuff. They teach you how to make a litter, how to set a bone, how to make a signal fire. That's yeah.
And I think this was kind of what Ken had in mind, was a sort of punishment, but also a creative outlet.
Like a sense of direction. It's like he has the passion, but without any set of instructions. What's he gonna do?
Right. And oh, yeah, he's setting off fires, but it's in a controlled and expected environment, right? We also have to remember that these scenarios are they're real life rescue scenarios, drowning, CPR, the like. And so from all of that, David got this sense of preparedness and resourcefulness, which pretty much encapsulates the intent of this program. His troop was stationed at a training camp called Lost Lake, and David thrived in this environment. He absolutely loved it. The whole program gave him a sense of knowledgeability, sensibility, and responsibility, a lot like what happened with the Golden Book, where it gave him these missing sort of attributes from his life
Oh, and so he would start modifying things.
that fed into his self-esteem. And this Lost Lake, as the name imbues or implies,
Hmm.
is a vast space. It's a getaway camp, right? And so that gave David plenty of time and autonomy, and his mind would just wander. So these ideas that went through his head, he would take them and polish them with this free time. He would treat them a lot like that model rocket, where he would constantly try and improve it. So he's constantly trying to improve these ideas. David hasn't overcome or dealt with any of his letting airs out of the tire tract when he was 5. Here comes troublemaker David, and he ended up smuggling in magnesium. Of course, safety last, so he stored it in a pretty conspicuous space, and some innocent and unknowing campers ended up getting their hands on it and inadvertently ignited the magnesium.
Inadvertently. Wow.
Well, remember, magnesium is extremely unstable.
Yeah. Precocious children.
These kids are surrounded and given tools to literally create fire. They're young, they're teenagers. What do you expect?
Idle hands.
Part of scouting gives you responsibilities, right? Not only are you learning, but you actually have to accomplish chores and whatnot around the place where you're stationed. This includes everyone's favorite chore, dishwashing. And David naturally hated it.
Oh, did he try to make some like super powerful dish detergent out of like hydrochloric acid and I don't know what else?
Spoilers. At the time, I don't really think he would need to, because, we're using like borax and whatnots.
For real. This is taking too long. I don't want to scrub. I just want to Melt the stuff off the dishes. Yeah, the dishes are done, dude.
Just eliminate them entirely.
I don't know if you caught that reference, but there was an old movie where they, by doing the dishes, they destroy them, and that's the point of the dishes are done, dude. Finished.
I don't what dishes? They went down the drain like they expected, right?
Hmm.
In order to resolve this issue, David channeled his entrepreneurial spirit from that lawn mowing business he had. The Golden Book provided instructions for brewing moonshine.
Oh, he made ethanol to clean dishes with.
He brewed up booze and exchanged it with other scouts for them to cover his dishwashing responsibilities.
I was wondering how the alcohol was going to clean the dishes, and I was like, oh, he bribed the other scouts with booze so they would take his shifts. Classic. You know, he could have had an enterprising career in the Navy.
Yep. You know what? I honestly am just surprised that he didn't just moonshine his way through this whole saga.
Honestly.
I prefer that he was more resourceful, and I think the lawn mowing was a more creative and beneficial outlet.
It just seems to me like David is one half step away from greatness, and it always ends up just collapsing back into this firestorm of absurdity.
And speaking of Firestorm's absurdity,
Oh no.
the scouting ends, right? So he has to go back to high school.
Oh.
When you're in high school, everyone's the outsider, right?
Hmm.
And when you get back to school, you're talking about what you did over your summer vacation, where you went, if you met anybody.
Yeah, right. Anywhere but inside.
David was a scout, which was not a popular after school activity, shall we say. Now, David, like we discussed earlier, had a sense of pride about it. One day, he wore his whole uniform along with the sash to a classroom presentation. And this kind of empowered and emboldened his self esteem, right?
Hmm.
Bullies being bullies.
Yeah.
He received ample ridicule, just like the hair dye. At this point, David lost interest in the scouts and just wanted to kind of give up on it. But Ken wasn't going to let that happen, right? Ken needed an outlet for David to take this energy somewhere, not in the house.
Hmm.
Ken saw the scouts as a sort of punishment, right, for the antics in the basement. The scouts offers all of its candidates or enrollees a sort of ultimate final prize, a form of the Eagle Scout rank. Really, just like any other major prize, it requires a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, if you're that's a big goal for scouts. You know, you have to throw yourself headlong into it.
So the Eagle Scout requirements pretty rigorous, right? So it requires 21 merit badges, 11 are mandatory and defined explicitly by the Scout program. 11 can be chosen at the candidate's discretion among many others. So they give you a whole slew of badges that you can go after, and you can choose 11 of them. Now, the counselors would take the Scouts' merit badge work and validate it, make sure that it was up to par.
Hmm.
David met most of these requirements within a year. He just went whole hog, incredibly voracious. Before we go any further, I need to provide some historical context about the Atomic Energy Commission. At this time, Congress Atomic Energy Commission, and this commission would oversee atomic research and development during peacetime. They had, and just like any other commission or department, had a whole marketing department. This marketing unit team worked very closely with the Scouts, and the AEC created the Atomic Merit Badge.
Really? I didn't know about the atomic merit badge.
Eagle candidates could complete this badge for those discretionary units.
So this must have piqued his interest mightily.
Well, I mean, the AEC, right, and this coalition, right, created this sort of feedback loop, this sort of empowered marketing outlet.
Yeah.
The AEC could really downplay negative narratives, and they rephrased and created a lot of spin regarding the 3 Mile Island incident. Part of this merit badge scouts could actually tour facilities.
Mhm.
So they could go to places like the Enrico Fermi plant, 3 Mile Island, or just really whatever plant was available. Scout counselors essentially sponsored Eagle candidates. Candidates would work with the counselors closely, and then the counselors would pass information along up through the chain. Counselors, and just like any sponsor, would provided the requisite information to complete the badge. Of course, David wanted more information about this atomic badge. His counselor gave David a Geiger counter and an informational pamphlet. And this pamphlet, of course, a product of spin and its time. So it used common vernacular phrases like nuclear power, and it emphasized the danger of atomic power or atomic energy, and it really showcased exactly what people are angry about when they protest nuclear power in this topic.
I wonder how well he handled that, given his uneven, imbalanced, uh, rose-colored lenses view of nuclear energy in general.
I want to be a little more clear, is that the the common vernacular outside of the pamphlet. So the pamphlet wasn't really using things like nuclear power.
Hmm.
It was still using atomic energy, which carries along with the star power, right? Like this mystery. People at in David's time in that zeitgeist used words like nuclear power,
Oh,
which also carries with it a lot of negativity.
right, right. Yeah, it was definitely some loaded language.
Right. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, that does.
The pamphlet offers mostly propaganda because, of course, it's from the AEC. It is part of marketing. The pamphlet used terms like atomic energy. It spouted a lot of different things about like scientific whimsy and progress and that sort of thing. But it notably didn't mention the Chernobyl disaster.
Hmm.
The AEC is this atomic badge, the requirements, very easy to obtain. And part of it, David made demonstrative models of atoms of common elements, and he would make them from ping pong balls, clay, and marshmallows. Your model airplane of atomic energy, right?
Right.
The badge required that David build a Geiger counter from a kit.
He built his own Geiger counter. That's no small feat.
Remember, he built it from a kit.
Oh, yeah, but still, I mean, not too many people who weren't actually. I think most kits at the time were surplus. There was a time when people were actually prospecting for uranium to sell to the government during the beginning of the atomic age. I imagine that's what he got. He got himself a cheap surplus Geiger counter.
David, ever the overachiever, worked enough to earn 3 atomic badges. And through this work, he expanded his knowledge base. And this pamphlet contained plenty of information. And it noted that electrostatic brushes used for cleaning film negatives
Mm.
also made use of the raw element polonium. It also made note that smoke detectors make use of the synthetic element americium.
Oh yeah.
And David's scout counselor said that certain appliances may contain elements and radioactive elements that people just throw away. So he could just go to a junkyard and get some appliances and try and find radioactive material that way.
Hmm.
Also, medical waste often contains radioactive material.
Yeah, I imagine he would have had to have done a lot of scrounging because anything that's being thrown out like that has probably got a very minute amount of anything radioactive in it at all. So he would have been like, it's like the people who collect scrap electronics for the gold plating.
Right. And yeah, so people just throw away medical devices. You can go to the junkyard and find what you need. And really just about anything that you would want or need is available in the wild. You just got to really look for it. Now, at this point, David felt a little aimless after getting this atomic badge. He had finished everything, and this atomic badge gave him a sense of purpose.
Right.
This sort of what now feeling came over him.
Hmm.
And so David's daydreaming caught up to him at this point. And so he thought he'd play a game of Pokemon, right? playing Ash Ketchum, but with the periodic table. The last 34 elements of the periodic table, extremely difficult to obtain because they're radioactive and extremely regulated.
I mean, it's regulated. You can't just go and buy it.
Yeah, you can't just go to Ace Hardware and be like, I'm gonna get some uranium ore.
Wasn't that the joke in Back to the Future when Doc Brown was talking about trying to buy uranium on the like, why did you go through the Libyans, Doc? It's like you can't just buy uranium-238, Marty. God, I've got to watch that again. Just the first scene, just for that bit.
Also, bear in mind that a lot of these radioactive elements are synthetic.
Yeah, they have to be created in a lab by like actually physically altering one element using bombardment, right? Or they add an electron or take it away somehow.
Exactly, as discussed in the previous episode. Some of these are synthetic, americium, and polonium from the Curies, and curium. This challenge only fed David's drive to capture these elements. In high school, David's physics teacher provided a decent resource. He initially dismissed David's Pokemon activities as wild.
Right.
David's physics teacher thought that no reasonable person would expend this much effort to collect literally all of the elements. And the physics teacher thought Neon would pose enough challenge for David and that David would just stop there.
Right.
But again, David saw this as a challenge that no one could stop him now.
Yeah. I mean, when this guy gets obsessed with something, it's, he gets his blinders on.
He definitely got fixated. David needed some help finding the rarer elements. And David had a hookup, not a hookup, but had a friend,
Like a connection.
a connection that worked at the local community college. This connection would essentially fence stolen radioactive material to David. And David thought about working at the lab.
What was his genius solution to this?
He had a moment. He thought otherwise.
All right.
He came to the realization that he knew he'd end up stealing equipment or material and therefore landing in legal trouble.
Oh no.
He still has his connection, right? He's just not going to work at the lab. David's community college friend gave David phosphorus sticks. We are clearly learning from our mistakes here, aren't we?
Phosphorus. Nasty.
When it's stored, right, it's left in this sort of can and oil.
Oh, it's highly reactive. You have to keep it isolated from the atmosphere.
Right, because when one exposes phosphorus sticks to the air, it ignites.
Yep.
So naturally, David went to the outskirts of town with this community college friend, pulled out the phosphorus stick from this oil-filled container.
Yeah.
He tossed it on the ground. It immediately glowed green and ignited. A quick aside, dear listener, chemical fires are very dangerous.
Yep. Yeah, there's oxygen in water, and if the fire is burning hot enough, it'll just take that oxygen and use it.
Because we can't just use water. That will just spread the fuel around. They have to be extinguished through other means, essentially by depriving the fire of oxygen. David naturally poured water onto the phosphorus fire, which, guess what?
Spread the fire.
Erupted into a bonfire.
Lovely.
Fire engines in the distance. David and company fled. Gunfire in the distance.
What was the fallout from this?
Who knows?
We don't know what happened after that. Well, I guess no one ever got punished.
They fled. They ran away.
Still, man, that's...
The fire department probably figured out it was some chemical fire pretty quick, and they just were like, what happened here? And it just kind of petered out from there,
Yeah.
This community college friend ended up hooking David up with pure sodium.
Oh, God. Another highly volatile and reactive substance. Also has to be stored in oil. It will react with the moisture in your hands if you touch it.
He has this can, essentially, and he had failed to label what it was. Of course, he wasn't going to store it anywhere safe, because safety last, right?
No. Yeah, why would you do that?
And, of course, he wouldn't tell anyone anything about it.
Oh,
Just like the phosphorus, just like the magnesium, it got discovered and misused. Ken, in one of his little excursions in the basement, discovered this mysterious unlabeled can with these sort of white sticks in it and oil. And I don't know, is this drugs?
pixie sticks.
Right. Ken took these sticks to David's chemistry instructor, Sue Young. Now, Sue immediately identified the sodium sticks. And of course, Sue just was blown away. She couldn't believe it. A vetted chemistry teacher like her couldn't obtain sodium. Not like this.
Right.
Not even for a legitimate high school classroom.
Need a higher clearance.
Who knows what this community college friend is doing? Where did he get it from?
Clearly violating the order of operations if you're dealing in stuff like that.
Again, safety last.
It's more suggestion than mandatory.
Sue Young saw David as an excellent chemistry student. She thought he was, quote, immature, had poor study habits, and lacked discipline, unquote. Excellent at science, not so great at the other things, as discussed. Not the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Obsessions are this way. I mean, that's just the way it is with the pathology of it. You see the flowers and you don't see the hazards, you know?
Additionally, from Radioactive Boy Scout, David should have been a shining star. Instead, he daydreamed about space travel and nuclear energy and wallowed in academic mediocrity. Sue thought David, the slacker, getting sodium? How?
He knows a guy.
But she doesn't know that he knows a guy. Any other teenager would receive multiple disciplinary actions,
Hmm.
maybe suspension from school, parents notified, any number of things, right?
Yeah, definitely suspension. You'd think that would have been on the table a long time ago.
But just like many of these other past incidents, the lecture and the biology course, all of this just forgotten, like dust in the wind.
Right?
David harboring potential explosives stored arbitrarily in a basement somewhere? Perish the thought.
I mean, right.
Ken continued his investigation and snooped around the basement. David didn't really like Ken mucking about in the lab.
What did they find there? He didn't booby trap it, did he?
Well, I mean, the sodium.
This is dangerous, but there's a difference between like making it so intentionally and just being negligent.
David told Ken to respect his space and belongings. Ken responded with, don't muck about with explosives in my house.
Reasonable.
David would constantly yap about nuclear energy. He would talk nonstop about his efforts to discover these elements and so on, and his projects and so on and so forth, to anyone who would give him an iota of time of day. He'd come to school, quote, frequently sporting a burn, scar, or other injury, unquote. This wasn't necessarily different from any other kid, right? You think about a sporty kid getting a friction burn, the footballer, the jock coming in with a broken arm.
Yeah, cost of doing business, right?
Right. So, and of course, David got buff, so maybe he's out doing damage to somebody, mostly himself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he was the unintentional recipient of a lot of the damage we're talking about here.
David's priorities definitely shifted. School at the very bottom, because he's min-maxing his learning. Part of school, you got to write papers, and he wrote a paper on environmental protection. Keep in mind the phosphorus incident where he mashed that red phosphorus in a plastic container and has to see an optometrist, and the sodium.
Yeah, there's a pattern here. I'm thinking he's going to fall into the familiar pattern of safety last.
He wrote this paper without proofreading or spell checking or second draft, nothing. Not that he would have in the first place.
All right, pure stream of consciousness rant about the glories of atomic energy.
And how that fits into environmental protection. I'd like to read an excerpt from the paper. Sites are becoming overfiller to the brim. Companies are dumping swiftly these chemicals onto the land or indirectly by streamers. These spelling and grammatical errors continue on like this.
Wow, no merit badges for the written word, eh? English isn't even his first language.
Of course, no one would believe that David was onto anything. How could he possibly take on such a massive project that requires reading and writing and work, right? As as a someone seeking out all of the elements on the periodic table. And of course, he could barely spell millions, which he spelled as Millins.
I mean, sound it out. Millions.
For David's 16th birthday, Ken bought him a Pontiac 6000.
Did he modify the car into a low-flying jet engine vehicle or something?
Nope, but David got a whip.
Oh my God, he's mobile.
David became a lot more ambitious in his element search. I think this Pontiac helped.
Oh yeah, I started combing the combing the neighborhood looking for polonium deposits.
Yeah, it's in the neighbor's it's underneath the neighbor's doormat, right? He found all the common ones. No surprise there. But now he needs to go and find the rarer ones. Regular news made finding these particular materials scarce because they are dangerous.
Oh yeah.
So this set a higher bar, right? Yet another challenge. To get this material, one would need to file mountains of paperwork in triplicate with half a dozen federal regulatory agencies just to get a smidge, an iota of potentially radioactive material.
Yeah, the Energy Commission is really strict about this stuff. They don't just hand it out like candy.
But David, the enterprising individual, found a shortcut.
Fellow at the junior college or whatever.
Many consumer products contain trace amounts of radioactive material, as we discussed in the last episode. The Scout pamphlet for the atomic badge spilled the beans. It listed agencies and contact information for various nuclear related agencies. So, Department of Energy, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and the American Nuclear Society. David would, quote, consult out of town experts and pretend that all of his questions were purely hypothetical, unquote. He would letter bomb these organizations and he would pretend that he was a high school professor. Think about that for a second. These letters, handwritten, no letterhead, and riddled with the same errors as his other essays.
Hmm. Oh yeah. Wow, Jesus.
The American Nuclear Society took David's bait. They ended up sending him a pamphlet. This pamphlet contained generic classroom games like word searches, general propaganda, and other teaching materials. But it also contained another piece of essential information.
Uh-oh.
It stated that commercial gas lanterns contain radioactive thorium in their wicks. So the Nuclear Regulatory Commission also responded. They listed commercial sources for many radioactive materials.
Oh no. So he just drove around sourcing all of the things that had tiny little itty bitty bits of material in them and collecting them.
Right. So not necessarily places where one could just, buy them, but like what sort of things might contain radioactive material.
This is I'm not sure how many people I mean, I haven't seen the whole entire series, but I remember an episode of Breaking Bad where this was discussed, where they were talking about sourcing um the constituent parts, the ingredients for their project and getting them piecemeal from different places to try and avoid scrutiny and things like that. But also this idea that you're dealing with precursors that have tiny trace amounts of the active ingredients you're looking for, which then have to be further refined. So I'm guessing he started collecting all these wicks and somehow drawing the radioactive elements out of them.
So let me finish with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
Okay.
That pamphlet, right? Their response stated, so it was like I said, it had industrial goods and whatnot that had specific elements. So they said, okay, shipping containers have trace amounts of uranium, but David doesn't have the money to buy a whole shipping container.
It also doesn't say where it's at. Is it in the paint? Is it in the metal itself? What is he going to do? Grind them up?
Right, and like, where's he gonna keep this shipping container? Is he gonna like
Yeah. Just go down to the docks and start scraping paint off the sides of these things.
right, or like, get a Jaws of Life and like take out chunks of shipping container. Also, like you had mentioned, I think previously, manufacturers use tritium, a radioactive gas, in glow in the dark gun sights and bow sights.
Watch faces. My father collects watches, and several of his watches have luminescent dials that contain tritium.
Right, so a replacement for the undark.
Shiny.
This gave a sort of renewed purpose for this new whip, right?
Mm.
David purchased an upgraded Geiger counter. He assembled it, outfitted it, and stuck it to his Pontiac.
You're kidding me. He drove around with it stuck to the front of his car.
I think this was more of like he had a holder that he outfitted to the car, and then he kept the Geiger counter in the holder.
Yeah. I'm honestly impressed at his ideas. You know what I mean? It's like this is some James Bond stuff. If James Bond was like, actually, no, let me back that up. This is some James Bond villain stuff.
So, and of course, it is a Pontiac, so he could use it for storage and transportation, right? As one would do with any other vehicle. David also upgraded his safety equipment for the potting shed. He bought a charcoal filter gas mask, and, wearing it posed a sort of challenge because Detroit, my dear listeners, also gets very hot.
Oh God.
The potting shed also completely unventilated. No gases are leaving, but also no hot air is leaving.
Right. Oh, no.
He permanently borrowed a lead lined protective suit sourced from a government civil defense agent, and he borrowed it under the guise of presenting for the scouts. Unfortunately, it is lower tier, so it was damaged and torn and whatnot. Not new, let's just say. David found some leads for radioactive material. He purchased electrostatic brushes, like mentioned in the pamphlet, and these brushes had a sticker on them. Warning label: radioactive, polonium 210 inside. David put on dishwashing gloves, pulled out that silver strip of polonium, and stored it in a vial.
Dishwashing gloves for safety.
Safety last.
Right. Oh, no. Oh God. You don't want your hands to get dirty, you know?
He needed a Meraceum next on the table. David, ever the enterprising individual, took full advantage of his time at Lost Lake. He raided unused and empty cabins and stole their smoke detectors.
Stealing the smoke detectors is just he's gone past like that's just the lack of forethought, right? Not only are you taking something that doesn't belong to you, this is safety equipment. You absolute madman.
I mean, they're going to get replaced anyways. That was probably what he was thinking.
Uh,
So many Rubicons, so little time. He disassembled these smoke detectors. It has this little like safety container for the Americium material, and so he disassembled that as well. He ended up also purchasing a few dozen old lantern mantles from a surplus store, and he, quote, reduced them to ash in the potting shed, unquote. He's got the thorium dioxide now.
and probably like several different kinds of cancers.
Quite possibly, I believe Americium is not dangerous to humans because I think it emits like beta particles and it can't penetrate.
Oh, betas? Yeah, betas are pretty benign.
So that's why they're more common in smoke detectors.
Yeah, I figured that had to be a reason why such a thing would be allowed. You know what I mean? Like this sort of a thing he's doing wouldn't be possible if, you know, you know what I mean? It couldn't be that dangerous, but still.
Think for a second here, right? The thorium dioxide in a single mantle, negligible.
Yeah, but you get several thousand of those or whatever.
Right, but and one mantle is going to last you a long time.
Hmm.
But he's got a dozen of them that he completely just burned through.
Yeah, he's misusing the substance in an attempt to, yeah.
Exactly right. This is against the manufacturer's operating guides, right?
You're not supposed to do that, sir. Sir, this is a Wendy's.
And of course, Americium, right? It's mostly innocuous. It's such a tiny amount. Again, it doesn't really matter if like one person lives in their apartment for their whole life with a smoke detector.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But you get a dozen of those and you remove it from the container. What do you think is going to happen?
You're over the recommended daily allowance at that point.
You're removing all of the safety features.
Oh boy, oh boy.
But obtaining and manufacturing and handling these materials all invigorated David. He brought his little experiments to school because, again, no one believed him, so he had to prove them otherwise. These skeptical classmates didn't believe that this dirt in the Ziploc bag was anything special. David busted out his Geiger counter, pointed it at the sample, and the counter chirped incessantly. The thorium was live.
Oh, it starts ticking.
Ken started to grow wise to David's little antics. He thought that these projects were just like an imagination that had just gone wild. Nothing could really come of all of this. To quote Radioactive Boy Scout, Ken took David to meet with a chemistry professor at Oakland University. The professor spent 1 hour with David and afterward told Ken David had a wealth of sophisticated knowledge. Before we bust into David's final project, his magnum opus, we need to have a discussion on reactors. A chain reaction lies at the core of nuclear energy. A chain reaction itself poses no danger. A reactor will reach critical when the nuclear or fissile material achieves a specific state. Essentially, one fission iteration will lead exactly to one more fission iteration. A reactor in supercritical state means that the power or the fissions will increase over time. This intrinsically isn't really a problem or that it will cause any issues. It's just that the issue arises when this supercriticality does not respond to regulation. This supercritical state releases excess electrons, which in turn corresponds to an increase of heat. Science postulated the concept of breeder reactors, and a breeder reactor produces more fissile material than it consumes. The chain reaction of one element would decay into another element, which then feeds back into this first reaction. That's really the short and sweet of a breeder reactor. You could think of it kind of like as a perpetual motion machine of nuclear energy.
Yeah, or like how a there's a chemical reaction in gunpowder that creates its own oxidizing uh, stuff. So like you could technically shoot a rifle in an environment without oxygen because it creates that self-sustaining reaction. At least so long as there's fuel.
Enrico Fermi, we built a nuclear station based after the man. We built that in 1950 outside of Detroit. The plant was built by Detroit Edison, which is the Detroit Metropolitan Power Group. They built their first breeder reactor called Fermi 1, and they started a reaction on November 29th, 1955. And unfortunately, during that same initiation, it suffered a partial meltdown.
Yeah, we mentioned this in the first half of the episode
Exactly.
briefly. This happened. This would have happened in his parents' lifetime, right? They would have been kids when this happened.
Yeah, that sounds about right. We realized at that point that this breeder reactor works fine on paper, but not much else. We stopped any further breeder reactor attempts after that. David wanted to continue on his quest to expand his knowledge. In order to get these synthetic elements, he would need to create a chain reaction.
Uh-huh. So what did he do?
One doesn't just simply get information on creating chain reactions.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that pamphlet from earlier with the contact information?
Oh, did he phone a friend?
He sure did. So he looked to the Department of Energy, and he would frequently directly inquire about chain reaction information, all from this Professor Hahn person. The Department of Energy sent him a book, Atoms to Electricity, and it unfortunately read like a product of its time, like most of his other reading material. And so David consumed and absorbed this pamphlet, propaganda and all. It did elaborate on the concept of a breeder reactor,
Mm-hmm.
but only conceptually.
I see. So he tried to build one with partial instructions.
Well, the pamphlet didn't have any practical or applicable knowledge, so it gave him the concept, but not how to get started.
Oh my God, this kid.
And at the time, breeder reactors existed and made operational. This technology essentially perfected. I mean, Japan and the Soviet Union had breeder reactor plants.
Hmm.
Now, David knew of the Three Mile Island and Chernobyl incident, or at least those reactors and those plants, but not really any of their consequences.
Yeah, because why would you research the full story when you can just focus on the rose-colored parts, right?
Common theme, safety last.
Not even considered. Like safety wasn't even on the list.
Right. It's like the bouncer at the club, he's like, you're banned.
Right, for real. Can't come in looking like that.
David especially knew nothing about the neighboring Fermi plant meltdown. But David didn't care because David just wanted stardom, like Marie Curie, and nothing could possibly stop him from achieving that stardom.
Right.
If anything would get in his way, he would just simply persist and problem solve his way through it. But then again, what else is new?
Yep. So he decided he was going to just wing it, do it live on this pamphlet.
David kind of hit a crossroads here because he held jobs but unfortunately they didn't pay well, right? And he because of that he couldn't directly buy fissionable material.
Hmm.
His quest for radium just didn't turn anything up. All he really had at the time was a small pile of metallic strips.
I see.
The Americium could provide a source for the radioactive core of his breeder. He realized he could combine that with an aluminum blanket. He could either continue with this small pile of material he currently has, or cut his losses and try something new. Initializing this reactor project proved relatively easy. This atoms to electricity pamphlet already provided the conceptual information, and it also provided a reactor schematic.
Again, it's something, but I mean, imagine trying to build an automobile based on a drawing. You know what I mean? This strikes me like that. I'm a layperson. I know that a nuclear reactor is basically just hot rocks boiling special water using very clean water to heat everything up. Steam, pushes the wheel around. This kid knows way more than that. And I don't believe that no, like, this seems like suicide what he's attempting.
You're not far off,
Oh, poor guy.
because this atoms to electricity pamphlet also provided a sort of checkerboard of elements in it, which another like schematic arranged all of these elements in an ideal pattern to create your breeder reactor, right?
Hmm.
And this arrangement would allow one material to decay into the next
Right.
ad infinitum until your fuel ran out. David needed appropriate fuel combinations to generate enough heat, and so he referred to a scientific encyclopedia. And this encyclopedia identified the non fissionable thorium 232, and this thorium transforms into thorium 233 isotope, gets bombarded by neutrons. This unstable thorium emits a beta particle, which targets the fissile uranium 233. But the uranium could replace plutonium per atoms to electricity.
What does that mean to us laypersons in the back here?
You take thorium, you throw a thing at it, and then that's going to throw another bit of itself at another element. And that's your cycle of breeder reactor. This last element, the encyclopedia said to use plutonium. Atoms to electricity said, well, instead of plutonium, you could use uranium, because plutonium, very hard to get a hold of.
If you can't make it from scratch, store bought is fine.
You say that, but uranium is scratch and plutonium is store bought.
Damn.
Because you can get uranium, just dig up Granny. It's underneath her, right? David, of course, designed his own breeder reactor. He needed a method, though, to bombard this thorium with neutrons. He knew that combining an alpha particle emitting element with aluminum would emit neutrons, and he wouldn't need much fissile material
Right?
because uranium 233 reaches criticality at only 30 pounds. What he would need to do is he would need to purify this thorium he got from the wicks, and he would need to collect enough uranium.
Oh, I see oh, this isn't shaping up to.
Unfortunately,
Yeah, he shouldn't have made the substitution.
uranium is hard to obtain, really. I mean, it is just about everywhere, but the thing is that other scientists in professional labs, universities, and the such could mine for uranium at scale. They could dig big holes for long periods of time and obtain who knows how much pitchblende. Now, they could take all of this and then purify it and get the correct isotope and so on and so forth using professional grade equipment, also at scale.
Scale.
But David could really only obtain raw material scraps, right? So the little bits of americium from the smoke detectors, the bits of polonium from those brushes.
Yeah.
He was on the right track there, right? So he thought he could reverse engineer these radioactive consumer products, right?
That's science.
Now, David wasn't really like the other girls. He definitely contrasted a lot with the other scientists. I mean, generally, scientists, through their work, provide practical knowledge about a topic in their field and contribute back to the field or the world writ large. And they substantiate all of this knowledge and confirm it through peer review.
Right.
They also attempt to expand the current field with valuable contributions. For example, Lisa Harris, through her work, discovered cystic fibrosis. Not only does that contribute to science and health, but it contributes to the world writ large. David just wanted to be a star. He just wanted to have his photo plastered on the wall, lined up next to people like Fermi or the Curies.
Yeah, you might say he earned himself a bit of infamy. I mean, we are talking about him.
True. Radiation as a scientific subject is still kind of an outlier because no formal scientific groups exist to share knowledge specifically about radiation. In high school, professional groups could provide study materials, books, classroom teaching materials, right? It really, other fields, and that they could give that to teachers, and the teachers could give that to the students to, again, expand their knowledge. In high school, students could break out into these smaller groups during class time and work on lab assignments as a sort of extracurricular or additional source of knowledge. Students could tour facilities, they could attend job shadows, and complete assignments integrating classroom and practical or real world knowledge.
Yeah.
So you get this holistic approach to science in the classroom. Radiation research never really received this treatment. David never really understood these group dynamics or the purpose of these groups. Regardless of his success in this breeder reactor, David would never receive recognition of his talent. There's no group out there that says, oh, they made the best reactor or they discovered a new way to decay elements. Not really. To harken back to Fermi's work, it was all just as part of what led up to the Manhattan Project, all extremely clandestine, all military-industrial complex. David got some mixed signals from his peers, but he ended up making friends in a scout troop, like Andy and Jeffrey. Their father, Jim Hungerford, reinforced David's passion. He suggested David pursue a career in science, but this didn't really stick with David because David didn't see Jim that often. David tried telling his instructors about his experiments, but to these instructors, they saw teaching as just a paycheck, just a job, right? They saw this as more of like a fun extracurricular sort of activity.
Extracurricular activity involving radiation.
Exactly. Now, Ken saw this saw David's pursuits as an unhealthy obsession, but Mom showed enthusiasm for David's pursuits. Unfortunately, Patty's drinking got worse over the years. Her schizophrenia and depression medications only seemed to exacerbate with the use of the alcohol. At night, Patty and Michael would just get drunk.
Yeah.
The pouting shed provided an ideal work environment. David could work in total isolation, uninterrupted for hours. He had total autonomy and reported to no one. David never received any feedback or peer review on any of his efforts, so he could make as many mistakes as he wanted and suffer no consequences.
Yeah. He's winging it in there.
He's doing it live, pretty much. David wanted to renovate the potting shed. He put on a new coat of paint and threw down some carpet. He purchased some new Pyrex beakers, for some context about other reactors, right? So these professional grade reactors would equip top of the line ventilation. They would also install monitoring equipment to provide feedback on radiation and heat within the environment. Nuclear reactor labs also provide glove boxes. It's these big, I think they're made of plexiglass boxes where they can have raw materials installed, put into them, and then the scientists would put their hands through these holes, which then get essentially fitted into a gloves that would give them free rein to essentially use their hands on the material without exposing them to any of it. All of this provides safety for the workers, so they're not directly working with the material.
Our guy wasn't concerned with that, I'm gathering, by the heavy exposition here.
David did not renovate with any new protective equipment.
Did he have old protective equipment?
Well, he kept that torn lead-lined civil defense suit. He installed a single thin sheet of lead on the tabletop.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure the lead in that new coat of paint is going to work just fine.
Oh yeah, there's 1/16 of an inch of lead paint on a sheet there. That'll help you.
We're at a point where David had everything he needed pretty much. He just couldn't really get started on his breeder reactor. Donald Erb of the Department of Energy, he held the position of Director of Isotope Production and Distribution.
It's a cool sounding title, Director of Isotope Production. It's real important sounding.
The golden goose for David.
Oh yeah.
Donald took Professor Hahn's bait.
Oh, that's right. He was impersonating a professor at this point. This fellow worked for the Department of Energy, right? The isotope guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's not gonna vet Professor Hahn here. He just took him at his word.
No letterhead, handwritten, riddled with spelling errors.
Reminds me of a Homer Simpson quote. He's like, "See, because of me, they have a sign." I imagine that policies were radically changed in the wake of David Hahn's shenanigans.
We will get to that. Donald Erb fielded this question, quote, does aluminum produce neutrons as well as beryllium with an alpha reaction, unquote. This question was core to getting David's reactor started. In order to facilitate this neutron production, he wanted to manufacture this sort of targeting device, like a gun almost. What it would do is that it would fire neutrons down a barrel at the thorium, and then that would decay it into uranium-233. This thorium would in turn fuel the reactor. David didn't quite have all of the ammunition. Erb of the Department of Energy provided just that. He said that beryllium produces neutrons from alpha reactions, operates at about 250 times more efficiently than aluminum.
So he was going for the next best thing that he could source.
Yes, so the aluminum just wouldn't cut it.
Right.
David still needed gunpowder to put all of this together. He needed an alpha emitter. Donald Erb of the DOE suggested using radium instead of americium. Ding, ding, ding. We've got a hook, line, and sinker for David.
Because he knows where to find radium.
Well, not so much. Remember, radium is very special to David. Not only because shiny, but also because of Marie Curie.
Yeah, the connection there.
Donald Erb also provided some tips on how to purify this thorium. The purified thorium would provide the requisite precursor for David's breeder reactor fuel. David shifted his plans a bit and generated a new procurement list. Donald Erb wouldn't believe anyone would actually obtain radioactive material. I mean, his teachers didn't.
He's a pretty resourceful guy, though. I wouldn't put it past him.
Well, bulk enriched uranium, you can't just go to Ace Hardware and get pitch blende.
Yeah, right, exactly. You can't just go down to the Get in Place.
Yeah, regulatory agencies keep a very close eye on these things.
I imagine he's going to find something that will do.
Well, the NRC holds essentially purview over any kind of these reactors, right? They need to license it, regularly inspect it, and regulate it. David needed to kind of change his tactics a little bit more again. He would have to go about his sourcing of materials by secretive or stealthy means. David revealed his projects to select individuals. His girlfriend Heather didn't really understand. She's his girlfriend who's also kind of like bored or sick of his little science tirades. Remember those love notes that quickly devolved into diatribes? So when David spoke of obtaining radium or decomposing thorium dioxide, Heather didn't recognize this as anything other than yapping. No red flags for her. From BoJack Horseman, when you're wearing rose-colored glasses, all those red flags just look like flags.
Right. Yeah. Good show.
David confided in Jim Miller, a friend and classmate, and even invited Jim as a collaborator. From Radioactive Boy Scout, Jim had enough common sense to turn down the offer. Jim even made a helpful three-dimensional drawing of a model breeder reactor, unquote. David returned to his gun concept to perfect it. He has more complete information to facilitate this device. He needed to transform his thorium into uranium, right? That's what his little gun would do. So we got a block of lead, very soft, malleable, and impedes radioactive emissions. Remember his suit that he permanently borrowed? Lead. From Radioactive Boy Scout, David easily hollowed out the block with a chisel, then smoothed out the pit with the narrow head of a power sanding tool. Into this chamber would go an alpha-emitting element and a quantity of beryllium or aluminum. Both absorb alpha rays and in the process kick out neutrons. Last, David pricked a tiny hole through the lead block with a needle so that the submicroscopic neutrons could stream out to their target. David loaded up on guns, but he still didn't have all of the ammunition. He needed fuel. He called as many chemical suppliers as he could for beryllium, and no one responded. Now, keep in mind, dear listener, arms manufacturers make use of beryllium for atomic bombs, and the DOE tightly regulates the distribution of beryllium. No one's going to call him back and say, yeah, I got a pound of beryllium for you. The fact that this didn't raise any red alarms or who knows what is worth a thought. Bear in mind, when inhaled, beryllium dust can cause cancer. OSHA and the EPA control its circulation. So you got three agencies that don't want you to have it.
Buzzkills.
But, David didn't really know anything about these regulations, nor did he really care.
He's never been much concerned with anything that didn't excite his interests,
It's either a challenge he can overcome or something he can ignore. He cut his losses with this beryllium and instead settled for aluminum strips. Radium provided David with an excellent alpha emitter. David would scavenge for antique clocks and scrape the paint off their faces, like you suggested.
Oh, yeah.
The Geiger counter in hand, David searched junkyards, mentioned earlier, and antique stores. He rummaged through attics and basements of friends and relatives. He ended up obtaining over a dozen clocks over several weeks.
Wow.
And David went to scraping. Scrounging for radium like this poses significant danger because radium dust poses an immediate danger to the respiratory system. This manner is also incredibly inefficient, as David scraped for 2 days and only had a small pile to show for it. Obtaining the requisite amount of radium in this manner was a lost cause. David also ran his Geiger counter on the polonium strips he got, and it just gave this paltry reading. Remember, polonium has a half-life of about 138 days, so essentially the milk went bad.
Oh, yeah. Oxidized or went off somehow.
It just doesn't emit. If it's not decaying, it's not emitting any particles.
Oh, its half-life was... Oh, I see. Yeah, its half-life was short enough that it actually diminished in its potency.
Scientifically speaking, a half-life is how long it takes for this element to lose half of its mass.
Right.
If it's past 138 days, that's one half-life. So you're already dealing with like something that's losing a lot of its mass relatively quickly. David still had some options with the Americium. This Lost Lake raid, mentioned earlier, didn't really come up with enough sample, and David calculated he'd need approximately 100 smoke detectors.
Oof.
These common household smoke detectors cost about $50 a piece.
Yeah, there's no way he's spending that much.
Right, and remember, David worked part-time at minimum wage. Pursuing that avenue wasn't financially possible.
He said that they cost about $50 each and he needed how many?
100.
Oh, yeah, $5,000. No way.
Jim Hungerford pointed David to a newspaper ad. A local company announced they'd sell off water-damaged merchandise at bargain basement rates.
Oh, no.
This
Oh, yeah,
includes
smoke detectors
smoke
would be
detectors,
from fire damaged buildings, right?
water damaged.
Or water damage. Oh, yeah, okay. I was thinking about the sprinklers going off after a fire.
Oh, yeah, I mean, possibly.
But yeah, water damage, yeah, whatever. What if?
I mean, the Americium isn't going to go bad, right?
Oh no, the special rocks got wet. They're no good anymore.
David drove to the store and he bought the whole stock. Ended up walking away with about a few dozen. David, through unknown means, discovered First Alert smells smoke detectors. These smoke detectors are both expired and defective, and First Alert sells them at bargain basement rates.
Well, he's not buying them for their function. He's buying them for their components.
Well, First Alert doesn't need to know that.
Exactly.
From Boy Scout, David convinced one of the firms to sell him about 100 for $1 a piece. He scored.
Oh yeah.
David stripped the smoke detectors with some pliers, and he stored these Americium chips in a pill vial. He couldn't just get to congealing all this Americium. It's a very loud, very hot process. It's literally a metal, right? So he needed a little quiet. He laid in wait, and one afternoon, Ken and Kathy left for work. His stepsister, Christina, went to a friend's house. So David got to work. From Boy Scout. David pulled a blowtorch from its storage spot in the garage. Wearing only a paper nurse's mask and gloves for protection, he poured the Americium chips into a pan that he placed on the patio table. He fixed up the blowtorch and spent 2 hours welding the chips together.
Hmm.
So this produced a small, misshapen silver-black marble of Americium. David's Geiger counter couldn't test the effectiveness of Americium because Americium emits neutrons, and neutrons don't provide charge.
Right. They're neutral.
Geiger counter only detects particles with charge, your electrons and I think your protons. David looked to the Curies for some guidance. He recalled that when neutrons hit paraffin wax, it emits protons.
Huh.
And Geiger counters can detect protons.
I see.
So David purchased a block of paraffin from the neighborhood drugstore. Again, this is paraffin, very common substance. It's literally just wax.
Yeah, it's wax. Yeah. Petroleum-based wax.
So David returned to the shed. He put on the lead-lined suit over his jeans. He put the paraffin on the table. He loaded his gun with the Americium ball and aluminum strips. And he aimed the gun at the paraffin. Silence in the shed. Broken only by the rapid clicking of the Geiger counter. David couldn't believe his success. He placed the Americium and aluminum in separate glass containers. He placed his lead neutral gun next to the containers. And now David needed to procure fissionable material. Unfortunately, the Americium wouldn't cut it. Decades earlier, mining outfits bored through northern Michigan looking for uranium and other precious minerals. So David looked into these historical sites. He scouted hundreds of miles of upper Michigan in his Pontiac. He hoped to find, quote, hot rocks, unquote, uranium ore.
He's got uranium fever, like the song.
David trekked off into state parks and trailheads, Geiger counter in hand. Unfortunately, he consistently returned empty-handed. David finally found what he needed on one trek. From Radioactive Boy Scout. Quarter of a trunkload of pitchblende on the shores of Lake Huron, unquote. David got home and began pulverizing this pitchblende with a hammer. But this didn't really provide any meaningful reading on the Geiger counter, so David sought a more practical route. He referred to the NRC manual for radioactive materials, how to source these things. Two firms in Cheshire showed up. One was a commercial and university-focused firm, and another was a museum and hobbyist-oriented firm. David pulled out Professor Hahn and sicked him on the first firm. And then he just simply sent a money order to the second firm. He presumed they'd immediately fulfill his order. He waited.
He just thought that they would just pony it up, huh?
I mean, hobbyist oriented, it's in their catalog.
Yeah.
Just another customer, I guess. In the interim, David continued studying other fronts, right? The different aspects of chemistry and different elements. David also used this time to go on dates with Heather. As far as school is concerned, he just daydreamed his way through high school. He worked just as hard enough to not fail. David sought the Eagle Scout award. I mean, he already earned most of the badges. He just needed to complete a service project that would benefit the community. Unfortunately, David's relationship started fraying. Heather dreamed big as well. She, however, tempered her optimism with pragmatism. She wanted to get an MBA. She saw herself as a girl bossing, gaslighting, gatekeeping in the C-suite. David, on the other hand, never showed much pragmatism. He just saw himself as a grand scientist, one that would, quote, go down in history, unquote.
Hmm.
College, the SATs, GPA,
I mean, we're talking about him right now.
no concern to David. David's true love was science, and he would trade time with science with time for Heather. And unfortunately, science was very time consuming. When David only talked about science, Heather grew bored. Ultimately, the Chechia firm pulled through for the hobbyist oriented firm, the money order.
Yeah.
They gave him some viable samples that he tested with the Geiger counter, but David needed to purify the uranium in order to make it reactor viable. David attempted to make yellow cake.
Oh, yeah.
This substance is named after its yellow, powdery consistency. Professional chemists, working in a laboratory, create the substance, and they use acids to dissolve the crushed uranium.
Hmm.
And they also make it more fissionable through enrichment and purification. Unfortunately, David's attempt could only fail. I mean, this process isn't necessarily complicated, and even with two different processes for yellow cake enrichment, known as magnetic field or gaseous diffusion, they require specific, expensive industrial equipment, of which,
Yeah, I'm sure that wasn't available to him in his backyard shed.
right, and you need specific filters and so on and so forth. Nothing David had.
Tony Stark built it in a cave using a rock. Yeah, well, I'm not Tony Stark.
The mere act of preparing the yellow cake just shows David's relentless madness.
There are countries, entire sovereign nations that dream of producing yellow cake. Just to get on that stage, you know?
And mind you, again, this process isn't that hard. It's just that David used coffee filters instead of industrial filters. The filtering and this purification process came out murky and disgusting. One could accomplish it with enough dedication and interest in the correct process. This is David we're talking about.
You can make you can like prepare food, prepare hot meals in a prison cell using scrounged equipment, right, that you've made or purchased from other inmates. It doesn't necessarily mean it's real cooking or that it's good or good for you, you know. It's like a hot meal is a hot meal, right? But like David is definitely doing things in an unconventional way to be generous. Unconventional. I would say reckless. He's being reckless.
Yellow cake itself poses significant danger to humans,
Mm.
just alone because it is unstable, radioactive, and it goes everywhere for a very long distance. So this posed immediate danger to himself, his family, and his entire neighborhood.
Yeah.
Mind you, had David successfully purified the uranium 238 into yellow cake, and if David fired the neutron gun at it, that would have generated plutonium.
Oh God.
Better known as the most deadly substance known to man.
Yeah, that the big one.
It also kind of begs another big question. Where would David store this yellow cake? Possibly in the fridge next to his other chemical experiments?
Right, exactly. In a shoebox in the top at the top of his closet there.
Tune in next time for the thrilling conclusion to David's adventures. Thanks again to my guest, Peter.
Thanks for having me.
Did you want to plug anything?
Gotta plug my phone into the wall. No, I'm good. Thanks.
All right. Take care, folks. Catch you next time.
Bye.